If you want to see us beat contest mode, you can come by the stream, twitch.tv/Mactics. We're going to be gunning for worlds first, myself and my buddies Dusty and J-Love. And by watching the stream, you'll be able to acquire 2 exclusive emblems, one simply by watching for a couple of hours, and the second simply by gifting a subscription. So you can come by, watch us do it, figure out all the mechanics. I'll try and explain them to all y'all, and then you can go and try it yourself. Or you can take these builds and go ahead and take a crack at worlds first along with us. Brand new Sundered Doctrine dungeon comes out tomorrow, and whether you're looking to tackle it on contest mode or just beat the regular normal mode as soon as possible, you probably are looking for some builds on one of the 3 classes, whichever one you're most comfortable on, and some weapon recommendations for what you should take in based on, generally speaking, what has been good for dungeons in the past and based on what the current meta is. So I just wanted to make this video today showcasing what I personally am taking in, and you know, you can go ahead and copy me if you want, or just kind of bounce your ideas off of the information I give you today. So we're going to start with all the weapons first, and then we'll talk about kind of class specific builds that I think are going to be really solid for the dungeon. Starting off in my kinetic slot weapons, this is one that unfortunately I think a lot of people are not going to be able to bring in, but that's okay. It's a situation where if you have it, you should bring it in. This is the Tenacious Mastery, which was obtainable from the past couple of Iron Banner playlist drops. This thing with chill clip is just an absolute demon. Anything that is a non-boss target, you can freeze it in like 3 shots. It does very respectable damage, and so any encounter where I'm seeing enemies that are a little bit tankier or enemies that are clustered up a little bit more, where I just kind of want to spread a bunch of slowing and freezing debuffs, this rocket sidearm not only does good damage to take them out, but is absolutely spectacular for crowd control. If you don't have this, bring something else with chill clip. Maybe you could go like a Riptide with chill clip. You could go the Salvation's Edge sniper with chill clip. Just anything with chill clip, so you do have that special weapon chill clip freezing option. I also always like bringing in a slug shotgun. Typically, I don't find that this gets used super often. This is the one from Deepstone Crypt with Reconstruction and Recombination. If you have a different role that you like, then that works perfectly fine. But I just really like bringing in a slug shotgun just for situations where I don't have a lot of use for my kinetic slot. My energy slot is typically always my primary ammo slot. My kinetic slot is always my special ammo slot. And there's a lot of weapons that I will typically go to over the slug shotgun. However, there have been a few encounters in the past where there's just an extremely tanky target, and it feels really nice to have something like this with recombination where you can take them out in 2 or 3 shots and then get on with the encounter, especially if it's like a timed encounter, for example, with a timed mechanic. I also love bringing a couple of legendary sniper options. In my opinion, you have 2 options here. One that's going to be a little bit more geared towards general tankier target ad clear from long ranges. Similarly, this is also from Deepstone Crypt. This is the Succession. You can also get this from Onslaught. I like going with Reconstruction and Vorpal Weapon, but I just think it feels like a really solid sniper for taking out tankier targets at range. I also like always bringing a legendary sniper, special ammo sniper, that's more DPS oriented. So if we recall back in Warlord's Ruin, something like the Supremacy with rewind rounds and 4 times the charm was an absolute animal for smoking that final boss. The DPS phases were relatively short, so getting in as many shots as humanly possible in a short period of time was really important. In a situation where we have another boss like that, I think something like this could be really nice. Moving on, Izanagi's Burden is something I pretty much always bring to every day 1 dungeon, every day 1 raid. It's not used as frequently these days, but like I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was a situation where we ended up wanting to pull out Izanagi's Burden. Now, what is a little bit different about this dungeon day 1 contest, normal, whatever difficulty you're doing it on, and most others, is that typically you pair Izanagi's Burden with an auto-loading holster heavy weapon. And the idea is you shoot the Izanagi's Burden shot, you hit the reload, then you switch to your auto-loading holster heavy, typically a grenade launcher or a rocket, fire it off, and then you put the heavy weapon away, pull the Izanagi's Burden back out to shoot it again, hit the reload, and then when you switch back to your heavy weapon, the shot's reloaded. Unfortunately for this dungeon, auto-loading holster is disabled. But if you were playing a little bit during episode Echoes and you were doing the Vespers host dungeon, there's actually a pretty decent workaround around not having an auto-loading holster available, where with our Izanagi's Burden, we can pair, for example, a grenade launcher that has the Envious Arsenal, dealing damage with both other weapons, aka our Izanagi's, plus like then we switch to our energy weapon and fire one shot. It basically procs the exact same way as bait and switch before readying this weapon refills it from its reserves. So the idea with this DPS rotation is you would go Izanagi's shot, switch to the GL, empty, or rather, since this one has bait and switch on it as well, if you can get an envious bait and switch, that's the absolute perfect situation you want to be in, because you proc both of these perks in the same manner. So you're in a situation where you shoot your Izanagi's, then you switch to your energy weapon, shoot one bullet just to get an instance of damage, switch to the GL, shoot a shot with the GL, that procs bait and switch, and then you empty the mag. Then you go back to your Izanagi's, shoot the Izanagi shot, back to and reload the Izanagi's, go back to your energy weapon, one bullet, that is going to proc Envious Arsenal to refill the GL, and then you shoot a shot with the GL, procs bait and switch, rinse and repeat all day long. I think that could be a very viable DPS rotation depending on what bosses we get. So that's kind of your workaround with auto loading holster being disabled if you have access to a role like this. Moving on, I always love bringing a grenade launcher with disorienting grenades. Any non-champion, non-boss target automatically just closes its eyes whenever you have one of these and you shoot it anywhere near it. Absolutely spectacular. Unfortunately, auto-loading holster is disabled for this dungeon, like we just said, so you will want to try and find one of these with something like slide shot on it, for example. If you do have to manually reload it, though, it's not the end of the world. I just really like always having something with disorienting grenades. Always nice to have in the back pocket just in case. I'm also bringing in a mountaintop. Similarly, unfortunately, auto-loading holster is disabled. I just like it for the recombination, though. It kind of serves a similar purpose as the slug shotgun for being able to nuke a tankier target real fast. This one just works at longer ranges because that micro missile can travel basically infinite distance. You will definitely want one with something other than auto-loading holster. It's kind of up to you. Similarly to the Heritage, though, I doubt that this will see a lot of use in this dungeon. It's just kind of one of those back pocket picks where it's like, maybe we end up liking it, maybe we don't. Moving down to the energy weapons, honestly, when it comes to energy weapons, I typically always recommend people go with hand cannons or SMGs, covering all of the different elements, and really just bring what you like. So I always, like pretty much anytime I'm doing a day one raid or a day one dungeon, I find that I'm always, for the majority of it, always in my energy slot using either Zali's Bane with explosive payload and incandescent, Callus's mini tool with threat detector and incandescent, or my funnel web with subsistence and frenzy. If you don't have a good funnel web, you can use the recluse as well from Onslaught as an alternative. I personally like funnel web better just because the Viced Stinger origin trait is better than whatever you get on recluse in my opinion. But ultimately, when it comes to energy weapons, I really always do say it is honestly dealer's choice. I'm bringing an area denial grenade launcher as well. This is the one from Vesper's Host. If you get a decent roll of the brand new one from the Nether activity, I think it's called like the Psycho Pomp or something like that. It's the Arc area denial grenade launcher. I think those could have interesting gameplay loops and potentially valuable angles in this dungeon. It kind of depends on how predictable the enemy spawns are and how close you're able to be to where the enemies do spawn. If you're like regularly playing next to a door that they all run out, then this can be decent, but we'll see. Now, an energy weapon that you're not seeing here right now that you might have expected to see is Lord of Wolves, which has been basically one-shotting everything in the game recently. I am not sure yet if it's bugged or if it's just really strong right now. I don't know what the comms have been on that recently from Bungie, and I don't know if it's going to be disabled for the dungeon tomorrow or not. I would recommend having one in your back pocket just in case it's not disabled, but as far as I can tell, it seems like the damage is like too high, like much higher than it's supposed to be, so I'm kind of expecting it to get disabled. But I mean, you could like might as well bring it just in case. I don't really know. What I am, however, expecting to be a superb option is the Queen Breaker, which just got a catalyst this episode that gives it rewind rounds. And so when you pair this rewind round catalyst with the Queen Breaker in conjunction with the low zoom sight that fires the 3-round burst, this thing is a DPS animal. And if that wasn't enough, if you do your bounty prepping and you get a lot of XP early on, if you can work your way up to particle reconstruction to even further boost the damage of your fusion and linear fusion rifles, anytime that you deal a significant amount of damage to a target in a short duration, this thing is going to shred. If we're in any situation where we're DPSing a boss and we're not required to be moving around the map all the time, if we're able to just sit still and fire away, I think Queenbreaker is going to be a top tier pick. And if you want to get the Catalyst extremely quickly, you have a chance to get it from any ritual playlist activity. So that's Strikes, PvP, and Gambit. The fastest way to do it, if you go to my YouTube channel and you look at the Shorts tab, I have a YouTube Shorts. I also have it on my TikTok as well. If you want to check out my TikTok, if you don't mind following me over there, that'd be great too. That shows you the fastest possible way to get it. Very easy. You can do it solo. Involves like Crucible private matches, basically. Another thing I'm bringing is an Eager Edge Sword. This is really just for mobility. This typically makes jumping areas, jumping puzzles a lot easier as well, so I would recommend you bring one. But obviously, I don't think I'm going to be pulling this out in any combat situations. Already talked about the Envious Arsenal bait and switch grenade launcher. If you don't have one with a role like this, you could go Envious Assassin with bait and switch. There's a lot of options here. You could go something like Envious Assassin with Cascade Point, but just some grenade launcher that has decent DPS perks if you have access to one. Bringing a tractor cannon, I'm 99% sure I'm not going to use this, but I always like having a tractor cannon in the back pocket just because you never know. What I'm bringing this time that I pretty much never bring to day one raids and dungeons is Grand Overture. And pretty much the only reason that I'm bringing Grand Overture is because this thing, in my opinion, this was the peak heavy weapon in terms of ease of use and safety and damage for the contest mode Vespers Host final boss. I know there were a lot of DPS strategies that worked exceptionally well that did not involve Grand Overture, excuse me. However, a lot of them required extremely high levels of mechanical execution that I think a lot of players would probably not be capable of, myself included, on short notice. I think a lot of the DPS strategies that you might have been seeing people use for like World's First for Vespers Host are DPS strategies that are only able to be pulled off by World's First players, and that's why they win the World's Firsts. I'm not entirely sure that, you throw us into a brand new contest mode dungeon if we're going to be able to execute some of these DPS strategies off the cuff and be comfortable enough with the DPS phase mechanics that quickly. Which is why, is this going to be the number one DPS option if you are most optimal and most mechanically talented? Probably not. Is it going to be a DPS option, however, that is going to be very safe, reliable, and easy to execute for 99% of players? Absolutely yes. Don't know if I'm going to use it or not. In most situations where I think Grand Overture would be useful, I think Queenbreaker would be a better pick, but I'm bringing it just in case. As far as my other heavy weapons, I got my legendary machine gun for general ad clear when I want my exotic to be used in one of my top 2 slots. I've got the Thunderlord for general ad clear when I don't really have a need to use an exotic up here, and I can just use my heavy slot for my exotic. And on the off chance that we have a melee boss that we also need to be healing while we're hitting it, a boss where like being close range, using a sword is most optimal, I'm bringing the Lament, because we saw how good Lament was for Crota on Crota contest mode day 1. Never know, might have a situation like that for the new day 1 dungeon. As far as builds, I personally am running on a Hunter, and going in on a Hunter, there's 3 setups that I plan on keeping very close to the hip. The one that I plan to run when I walk into the dungeon, and the one that I believe I'm going to be running 99% of the dungeon, especially for the DPS phases, is this Prismatic Celestial Nighthawk setup. So I've got Golden Gun Marksman to pair with the Nighthawk, Gambler's Dodge, Withering Blade. Grapple Grenade is awesome for general traversal in safety. Typically, if you're doing this on contest mode at least, there's a lot of danger in a lot of these rooms, so grapple can be nice for executing a mechanic quickly or getting yourself out of a pickle. if you're not really finding use out of grapple, you could also go with magnetic grenade and swap one of your facets to the facet of dominance, where your void grenades weaken targets, gives you another instance of debuffing. Otherwise, I would recommend the facet of balance along with grapple grenade. I'm going with Stylish Executioner and Winter's Shroud. I really love Stylish Executioner here as well, with the chill clip Tanasha's Mastery, or whatever chill clip weapon you have right here, because you're effectively slowing / freezing every single enemy and proccing Stylish Execution on every kill, so it's really nice for safety. Facet of Protection for bonus safety, Facet of Dawn for bonus DPS, Facet of Solitude, so that when you land rapid precision hits on enemies, Severing Blast, 40% DPS debuff on them, so they do 40% less damage to you. Great for survivability, especially if we have a situation where we have a boss that shoots back at us during the DPS phase. Facet of Balance is really nice for general ability uptime. Like I said, you can swap this for dominance if you want to swap out the grapple grenade. And Facet of Purpose, so that we get restoration when we pick up Orbs of Power. Now, if you're in a situation where you don't see a lot of need out of Celestial Nighthawk, maybe you're in a non-boss encounter and you're running this build, then what I would recommend you do instead is go with an exotic class item of your choice that you enjoy. My personal favorite one is Inmost Light Surturachne for the Woven Mail damage resistance, and Most Light for the ability uptime. And then I switch my Nighthawk, or my Golden Gun rather, over to a Tether. Great for general ad clear, great for general zone control, changes our Facet of Purpose to give us Overshield, which gives us bonus damage resistance in conjunction with bonus hit points. Feels really, really solid. This is the build that I expect to be running 99% of the time. Going with a Siphon and Loader mod to match my primary ammo weapon, Heavy Ammo Scout and Finder, Impact Induction Focusing Strike. I'm going to run a Concussive Dampener, and then these resistances are going to change depending on whatever we run into in there, depending on the damage type of the enemies that we run into when we get in there. Once I see what damage type the enemies are doing, I'm going to change these to match. Scavenger mod to match whatever heavy weapon we're running. Absolution, Innervation. These can also be swapped out for a Weapon Surge if you want more kick in your DPS phase, and then Reaper, Powerful Attraction, and Bomber. Another setup I think might be really decent is the On the Prowl setup. I literally just did a video about. You can do the Hard Light if you want to, but like I said, the Hard Light is not a requirement. But I think this On the Prowl setup is incredible for team play, especially in a contest mode environment where you're effectively giving all of your allies permanent invisibility. Great for keeping everyone super safe. If you want to see more about that video, you can click on my channel. It's my most recent Hunter build video. And then my good old trusty Omnioculus. 0.01% chance that I actually use the Omnioculus setup, the traditional Omni setup, in this dungeon. But, you know, always have it on deck. As far as the other classes go, if you plan on hopping in on a Warlock, in my opinion, one of the greatest Warlock setups this episode is the Geomag Stabilizers Chaos Reach setup with something like Cold Heart, Lodestar, Delicate Tomb, any legendary weapon with Volt Shot or Jolting Feedback. This setup goes absolutely nuclear. You got the Ionic Sentry, which is, you know, being able to blind a ton of stuff right away just by deploying the turret is really, really nice for a contest mode environment. Electrostatic Mind, you collect so many Ionic traces. I've got Discharge, so you make even more traces. You get stacks of Bolt Charge. Frequency, so you double all the stacks of Bolt Charge. I got Magnitude, so your Pulse Grenade lasts a little bit longer. Incredible grenade. Spark of Shock, so that your grenade jolts targets. Obviously, we're going Chaos Reach. Mod setup, nice and easy, really investing into the Cold Heart damage, the Cold Heart ammo with the Special Ammo Finder, the Harmonic Scavenger, the Harmonic Loader, and the Harmonic Siphon. Reaper for Orb Generation as well. Similar to the Hunter setup, Concussive Dampener, and then whatever resistances, these are going to change based on what damage the enemies in there do. The other Warlock setup that I think is going to potentially be spectacular for any Day 1 Dungeon, Day 1 Raid environment is still going to be Speaker's Sight on Pure Solar with Well of Radiance or Song of Flame, along with your Healing Grenade, Touch of Flame Hellion, and the Ember of Benevolence. I know it did technically just recently get nerfed, but the nerf specifically was that it simply doesn't, the healing turret doesn't shoot out the healing bolts at allies when they're full HP. But in a contest mode environment, that's not going to happen that frequently. I think this setup is still absolutely peak for end game content areas, contest mode areas, and even in the normal version of the dungeon, I think a Speaker's Sight build is still going to be really, really, really good. So those are the two I would recommend bringing in on Warlock. Finally, rounding things out on the Titan, my favorite Titan build so far, and one that I think has really strong applications for all content, including contest mode if you're doing the dungeon on that difficulty, has been the new Storm's Keep Titan. And this is the setup I did a build video on today. Maybe yesterday if you're watching this on Friday. Thunder Crash on Titan is always exceptionally strong, and I think you have a couple of different options when it comes to kitting this out depending on what the encounters look like in the dungeon. I think at a base level, you're pretty much always going to want protection, frequency, feedback, and shock, along with a pulse grenade. You're probably always going to want knockout and Storm's Keep as well. Where things can get a little different is in this fashion. If you're in an encounter where you're simply doing general ad clear, I think something like Insurmountable Skull Fort with Thunderclap is going to be very, very potent. And rally barricades, that when you do put your Storm's Keep barricade down, it's easy for your allies to shoot over. In a situation where you're not doing as much ad clear with your melee based abilities though, and you don't really need Insurmountable Skull Fort as much, I think that there is an angle for a setup that involves Titan's Ramparts, which allows you to have the shoot through barricade, and then you can go ahead and swap to Towering Barricade here, which basically gives you this like kind of pseudo bubble bolt charging DPS setup that you can shoot through, because you can shoot through the barricade, the enemies can't hit you back. So if we're in a situation where we have a boss DPS phase and the boss is laying down a lot of fire at us and it's really dangerous, and you have to kind of pick between, oh no, we need to be safe because we don't want to take too much damage, but we also want to dish out a lot of damage, throw down the Towering Barricade, Titan's Ramparts. Probably a very low probability that this is going to be relevant in this dungeon, but I don't know. It's just kind of something I was drumming up. Or if you're in the other situation where you're doing a lot of melee-based ad clear with the Thunderclap, and you have the Rally Barricade, and you're in a boss encounter, what you can do is you can have a second loadout where you quickly swap to your Aquarius of the Falling Star to rip off your Thunder Crash and do a ridiculous amount of damage to the boss, and then when you get back, you can go ahead and throw back on your Insurmountable Skull Fort, or throw back on your Titan's Ramparts. Obviously, I'm going to be making solo flawless dungeon guides right after the dungeon releases, so I'll try to have those up on the channel as quickly as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more of this stuff. And